Okay, so here we go with our backwards FOIL. So again, here is our factoring map. We're going to start with the polynomial. Remember, we simplify, we rearrange, we remove that greatest common factor if it needs to be done. Okay, then we're either left with a binomial. If it's a binomial, we check all of our criteria that we learned in the last videos. And if it's none of these, then we move on. If it's one of these, then we go ahead and factor it. Check to make sure it doesn't need to be factored further, and then also prove your answer. Okay. Now, if it's a trinomial, this is where we're going to be at today. If it's a trinomial, just like in the last video that we did, you're going to check the factor test to see if it can be factored. If it cannot, it's prime, and we move on. We're done. If it can be factored, then remember we're going to factor it using the backwards FOIL method. Okay, and that's what we're going to be learning today. Okay, so that is where we're going to start. So with your notes, we are going to start with the first three steps, and they are always the same thing. They are for us to simplify, rearrange, and remove a greatest common factor if there is one. Okay, now here's what we know about this. We know that it's a trinomial in standard form, okay, and what's going to happen is it's going to factor into two binomials. All right, so we're assuming here that we have checked the factor test, it works, we know that it's going to have to be factored, it's already in standard form, and so it factors into these two binomials. And so here are the steps, and these steps are a little bit confusing at first just by reading them, but as we work through the process, it will explain each of the steps a little bit better. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find two factors whose product, remember that means multiply, is equal to A times C. Remember our A and our C up here. And the sum of those two factors is equal to B, this number right here. All right. Then we're going to expand the trinomial into a four-term polynomial, and we're going to group them into two binomials. And I'll show you what that looks like as well. You're going to remove any of the greatest common factors, and you're going to separate what you have into two binomials. So it's really not too bad. It's just going to take a little bit of time and practice on these. So, of course, we always repeat the process if the powers are not 1, and you always prove your answer. Okay? So here's our example problem. We're going to work through this. Excuse me. So here is our example. 12x squared minus 16x plus 5. All right, so first thing we want to do is check, does it need to be simplified? No, it's already in standard form, it doesn't need to be rearranged, and there's no greatest common factor. So next step, we need to check the factor test. So let's do our factor test. Okay, so A here is 12, B here is negative 16, and C here is 5. So we're going to plug that into our formula. So b squared minus 4ac. So b squared is negative 16 squared minus 4 times 12 times 5. So I'm going to plug that into my calculator, just like we did in the last video. And I get 16. And the square root of 16 is 4. So this can be factored. Okay? So that's what we're going to work with. We know that we can factor it, so now we're going to start the steps of factoring. So step number 1 said, find two factors whose product is equal to A times C and sum is equal to B. So first off, we need to know A times C. Well, A was 12 and C was 5. So if you multiply that together, you get 60. So we're looking for two numbers that if we multiply them, so we're looking for factors of 60. Okay, and then those two factors also have to add to equal this value of negative 16. So let's walk through our factors. Good thing we practiced this a couple weeks ago with factors of 60. So we know that there's 1 in 60, there's 2 in 30, 3 in 20, 4 in 15, 5 in 12, and 6 in 10. Okay, those are our factors. Now, if I add those factors together, if I multiply all of them, I get 60. If I add them together, I get 61, 32, 23, 19, 17, and 16. None of those equal negative 16. So let's think for a second about factors. We need two numbers that multiply to give us a positive 60. Could I use negative numbers as factors? Yes, I could. So let's try this again. This time we're going to look at the negative factors. So negative 1 times negative 60 would give me 60. Negative 2 times negative 30 would give me 60. Negative 3 times negative 20 would give me 60. Negative 4 times negative 15, negative 5 times negative 12, and negative 6 times negative 10. All of those are still factors of 60. Now if I add those together, I get negative 61, negative 32, negative 23, negative 19, negative 17, and negative 16. So what I'm looking for, remember, are two factors that multiply to equal 60. So let's look here. Negative 6 times negative 10 equals 60, and add to equal negative 16. Negative 6 plus negative 10 is negative 16. So these are the two factors that I'm going to use. So it's negative 6 and negative 10 are going to multiply to equal 60 and add to equal 10. So those are the two numbers that we were looking for. So that's step one. Now step one won't always be so challenging. Sometimes it'll be very obvious and you won't have to write anything out, but sometimes you are going to have to write those factors out, okay? So that's step one. Now, step two. Let's go back up here. So step two says, expand the trinomial into a four-term polynomial and group into two binomials. It's a lot of words. Here's what it means, okay? Now, I know that this negative 16, all right, can be split into the two factors that we just found, negative 6x and negative 10x. Okay, negative 6x and negative 10x, we know if we add them together are going to be negative 16. So I haven't changed anything here. All I've done is expanded this from 3 terms into 4. You know, remember that sometimes we, when we're doing our FOIL method, we always combine those middle terms in the middle of something. Well, now we're doing the backwards of that, the reverse, so we're going to have to expand it back out. So we're going to do negative 6x and negative 10x plus 5. If I combine those like terms, I get this that I started with. So I haven't changed anything. All I've done is expanded it in two forms, okay? Now, the other part of this said that we needed to group this into two binomials. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take the first two terms, 12x squared minus 6x, and put them right here in this set of parentheses. And then I'm going to take these next two terms, negative 10x plus 5, and put them in these two parentheses. So that's it. That's all I've done. I've expanded it and turned the negative 16 into a negative 6 and a negative 10. And then I have also put parentheses around the first two terms and put parentheses around the second two terms. I've grouped them. Okay? That's step 2. Step 3, remove any greatest common factors. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each of these separately. So I'm going to take 12x squared minus 6x. That's the first one. And I'm going to take out a greatest common factor. So here, the greatest common factor between 12 and 6 is 6. And then with our variables, we would also include the x. Okay, and if you're struggling to remember how to do this, there's still a video up called Removing or Factoring with Greatest Common Factor. You can go back and look at that video to help you remember how to do this. Now, once I take that out, I have to remember to divide each of these by that 6x. So 12x squared divided by 6x is 2x. Negative 6x divided by 6x is negative 1. Okay. Then we take that second one. We have negative 10x plus 5. And what we're going to do is go ahead and find our greatest common factor for this one. Now, I don't want to leave a negative here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to not just pull out the 5 as our greatest common factor. I'm going to pull it out as a negative 5. Okay? And I'm going to divide these. So negative 10x divided by negative 5 is 2x. And 5 divided by negative 5 is negative 1. All right? So that is step 3. We've taken out the greatest common factors from those two parentheses. Now, we're going to separate what we have into two binomials. That's step 4. All right, so here's what we've done. 2x minus 1 and 2x minus 1, all right, should match. When you do this and you've done it correctly, what you should have are, in the parentheses, two factors that match. That's going to be our first factor, okay? The leftovers are going to be a second factor. So what we had was a factor for both groups. That's 2x minus 1. And the second factor are the leftovers, 6x and negative 5. Sorry, you couldn't see that. All right, and so that's what we've done on this. We've literally just pulled out this, and then our leftovers, those greatest common factors, become the second factor. Okay, so the answer here that we have is 2x minus 1 and 6x minus 5. The powers appear to be 1, or are 1, so we appear to be done, but we still have to prove our answer. So let's do that. Let's prove. All right, we'll take that 2x minus 1 and multiply it by the 6x minus 5. Remember that 2x has to be multiplied by everything over here, and negative 1 has to be multiplied by everything over here. So 2x times 6x is 12x squared. 2x times negative 5 is negative 10x. Negative 1 times 6x is negative 6x. And negative 1 times negative 5 is 5. Then we simplify. So 12x squared, negative 10x, and negative 6x added together become negative 16x. That's what we were reversing earlier in step 2. And then the plus 5 comes down. And this is what we started with. So that means that this, right here, are our two factors of that trinomial, okay? So I know that this is a lot of information that I'm throwing at you, and that's okay. We're going to practice this. So I'm going to give you some practice problems to work on, and I want you to practice those. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be glad to help with anything that you come across, okay? So let's look. Here are your 5 practice problems that you're going to do. We're going to start up here. Okay, pretty straightforward. Just work through the steps on that one. Down here, make sure you rearrange it before you start to factor. Okay, it needs to be in standard form. Now down here, you are going to have to multiply this out and combine your like terms and kind of rearrange it and get it in standard form first. Same thing down here. You're going to have to do some work to get it into standard form first. And then down here, also a pretty straightforward problem, okay? Just make sure that as you go through these that you do factor test first to make sure that it can be factored. You don't want to get into this and be working so hard on it and then realize that it couldn't be factored to begin with, okay? So keep that in mind. You're going to be working on those. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if I can help you with anything, and I'll be happy to do that.